Welcome back to Shorter Recaps. In today's video, we will be recapping a post-apocalyptic action thriller movie titled I Am Legend, which was released in 2009. Before we begin, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this, and tell us what movies to recap in the comments. The movie begins with a doctor who is presenting a new genetically designed virus that successfully cured cancer with no side effect on around 10,000 people. 3 years later, we see that New York City has been completely deserted with no signs of human life. Amidst the quiet city, the rumbles of a sports car can be heard. A man named Robert Neville, who was a U.S. Army virologist, drives the car with his dog Sam. He's trying to hunt a herd of deer that jumped in front of his car with a rifle, to no avail. Robert gets out of his car to shoot the deer, but a lioness jumps at it before Robert, so he decides to go home in Washington Square Park as it's almost sunset. It turns out that the deserted city is a result of the cancer-curing virus that was shown earlier. After a few months, it started showing side effects that turn humans into cannibalistic albino mutants that are affected by light, called the Darkseekers. The virus spreads to 99% of the human population, and now Robert is the only known human survivor in New York, as he is somehow immune to the virus. He lives in a house where he stocks the food that he collects around the city, only accompanied by Sam. Most days he cures his loneliness by listening to tapes of people talking and also by talking to Sam. At night, he has to close his doors and windows to avoid being detected by the Darkseekers. One night, Robert has a nightmare of his wife, Zoe, and daughter, Marley, being attacked by a Darkseeker as they try to evacuate the city. He then wakes up, covered in sweat, and decides to exercise before going into his lab in the basement. There, he's been trying to synthesize a cure for the virus for 3 years. He injects several compounds into infected rats and records their behavior. One of the rats catches his attention as it turns docile instead of violent, or dies like the others. He thinks that compound he used on the rat, compound 6, as a potential cure and wants to test it on a Darkseeker. Robert heads out with Sam to collect supplies in the city from random apartments, then heads to South Street Seaport. For years, Robert has been broadcasting a recording of him telling any survivors to meet him there. That's why he goes there to check every day, although no one has come yet. Later, they notice a deer and Sam chases it into a building that's infested by Darkseekers. Robert carefully goes inside to look for Sam, but he sees blood all over the place and traces of someone being dragged upstairs. He follows it and finds Sam hiding under a table, but a Darkseeker attacks them before he can get Sam out. Robert shoots the Darkseeker to death, and they run away while being chased by the other Darkseekers. Sam escapes from a small passageway, while Robert jumps out of a window, taking a Darkseeker with him, and they both fall on the road. Thankfully, the sunlight burns the creature's body and kills it. Robert has the idea to capture a Darkseeker from the building to experiment on his cure, so the next day he sets up a snare trap at the building's entrance and lures the Darkseeker outside. A female Darkseeker falls into the trap, and Robert sedates her and restrains her to a bed. He noticed a butterfly tattoo behind her ear when noting her vitals, then injects her with compound 6. Instead of curing her, it makes her breathing slower and her pulse starts to drop. She suddenly wakes up and acts more aggressively, but eventually her pulse flattens out. Robert is disappointed and notes that compound 6 is ineffective on humans, then locks the female Darkseeker in a glass cell. Then we see a flashback of Robert's last day with his family, where Zoe was tested positive for the virus by the soldiers and couldn't leave the city. However, the test comes up as negative after rechecking. Zoe and Marley boards a helicopter that'll take them out of the city after handing over Sam to Robert and saying their goodbyes. Back in the present, Robert realizes that it's his birthday today. As usual, he goes to South Street Seaport and still sees no one. From his car, he sees a mannequin that he placed outside the Grand Central Station, and his immense loneliness starts to kick in. He yells at the mannequin to talk back to him and asks how it got there in the first place before finally shooting it. Out of nowhere, he steps on a trap that is similar to the one he used to capture the Darkseeker earlier. Robert is hanging on a rope before hitting his head and passing out. When he finally wakes up, the sun is about to set and Sam is waiting for him there, barking at Robert. He cuts the rope with a knife but accidentally stabs his leg with it during the fall. From the dark, he notices a few dark-eared dogs looking at him and Sam, but before they can run away, a building blocks the sunlight and causes the Darkseeker dogs to attack them. Sam manages to save Robert from the pack, but gets bitten herself before Robert shoots all the Darkseeker dogs. He rushes Sam home and injects her with some painkiller, but realizes that there is no way to save her. He has to kill her if she turns into a Darkseeker. So, during her last few minutes, he lovingly sings her a song. Robert notices Sam's teeth getting sharper, so he reluctantly strangles her to death. He buries her body the next day, causing him to be in distress. Robert, who has lost his will to live alone, decides to kill every Darkseeker he comes across during a night drive as revenge for Sam's death. He makes a loud noise to attract them and uses a mannequin to confuse them before attacking them from behind. The alpha of the herd attacks Robert by flipping his car, causing him to get stuck inside. Robert can feel someone dragging him out of the car even though he is half conscious. He thinks he is hallucinating as someone asks him for his address, and Robert gives it to them. In another flashback, we see Zoe and Marley not being able to fly away in the helicopter as they are hit by another helicopter, both dying in the explosion right in front of Robert. When Robert comes to, he wakes up in his living room with the TV turned on. He notices that his wounds are cleaned up, and there's a woman and a child eating in the kitchen. It turns out that his savior is a woman named Anna and her son named Ethan. As she offers Robert breakfast, she tells him that they are survivors from the Red Cross evacuation ship who came looking for Robert after they heard his radio broadcast. They are from Sao Paulo and are heading towards a survivors' camp in Vermont. Robert says that there are no survivors left, but Anna is adamant that there are. In frustration, he throws his plate to the wall before apologizing and heading back to his room. The next day, Robert thanks Anna for saving him the other day, and she asks him to come with her and Ethan to the camp. However, Robert doesn't want to leave as he wants to find the cure for the virus. Later that day, the three of them go to the city and seize the trap that Robert was caught in previously. Anna thinks that the Darkseekers are the ones who made the trap, but Robert is unsure as he thinks they don't have the same intelligence as humans. They later go to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, where Ethan gets to play in the fish pond. There, Robert realizes that the reason Compound 6 didn't work on the Darkseeker is because he needs to lower their body temperature first. The three go back to Robert's place, and he lays the female Darkseeker on ice. Anna is shocked to see her and pictures of other Darkseekers that became Robert's experiment subjects, although he feels no remorse in their deaths. Later, as the two put Ethan to bed, Anna tries to persuade Robert again to join them in Vermont, but he really thinks that there are no other survivors in this world. Suddenly, they hear a noise from outside as a large group of Darkseekers are approaching them. It turns out that they had followed them from the city and waited until dark to attack. Anna rushes upstairs to get Ethan, while Robert ignites the explosives he had set up outside the house. Although many of them died in the explosion, the others doesn't stop charging. As Robert goes upstairs, the Alpha Darkseeker attacks him before being chased outside by Robert. He comes to Anna as she is hiding with Ethan from another Darkseeker. He rushes them to his basement lab and shuts them in the glass cell with a female Darkseeker. Soon the lab is overrun by Darkseekers, and the Alpha sees the female Darkseeker lying inside the cell. He tells the other Darkseekers to stand back before furiously banging his head on the glass door, trying to break it. Robert tells him to stop, but he doesn't listen. Instead, he stops and decides to draw a butterfly on the glass door. This makes Robert realize that the Alpha just wants the female Darkseeker back, so he unlocks her from the equipment and tells Anna to open the cell door. Robert wheels out the female Darkseeker and says he needs to get his syringe to wake her up. The Alpha seems to understand and keep his men at bay, so Robert gets the syringe and injects something to the female Darkseeker, waking her up. It turns out that she's the Alpha's lover, and they embrace as they are finally reunited. Guilt for killing them and making them his lab rats. The Alpha then leaves with his lover and the rest of the Darkseekers, making Robert Anna and Ethan safe. The next morning, they all decide to leave for the survivors' camp. Before leaving, Anna records a radio broadcast for any other survivors, informing them to head to the camp in Vermont and that they have a potential cure. That's all for today's recap. Thanks for watching and see you on our next video.